Good evening, I'm Maureen. I'm a senior cardiac nurse at the British Heart Foundation, and welcome to Lab Live. We're here at the University of Oxford, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Jana Koth, who is going to answer some questions that you posed to her this evening. Evening, Jana.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
We're going to learn more about the Mending Broken Hearts Appeal, and which is funding regenerative medicine. And Jana's a researcher here at the University of Oxford, and she's working with one of our BHF professors, Dr. Paul Riley, and also Professor Roger Patient, and they're both regenerative medicine experts. We will be finding out a bit more about her work later on, and also do the Q&A in a little while as well. But we've taken some questions in advance from Facebook, and if you have a question you can get in touch with us via Twitter using the hashtag LabLive. So a reminder about the Mending Broken Hearts Appeal. We started it in 2011. And hearts aren't able to heal themselves, so we have lots of researchers out there trying to find a cure to mend hearts after a heart attack, and that's why we're funding regenerative medicine research like Jana's. It's important to know that heart failure can have a severe impact on people, not only the people that have had a heart attack or whatever the cause of the heart failure is, but also on their families. And we've got a great video that's been made by two of our BHF supporters, Charlotte and her brother James. Their mum Lorraine has heart failure, and if you'd like to check out the video, you can find it on bhf.org.uk/find-the-cure. So Jana, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, as you've probably seen already in the video, we here in Oxford in the university, we are trying to look at how zebrafish regenerate the heart. 10 years ago it was found that zebrafish can regenerate the heart perfectly well, and just 2 years ago it was actually found that heart cells themselves are capable of doing that. And we now set up the lab so that we can actually look at how they're doing that, and we want to understand which genes are involved in regulating this and what the different components are. So.
Okay. Jana's also made a great video for us, which we're really grateful for, and that's something that you can look at on our website as well. And the link for that is bhf.org.uk/LabLive. So have a look at both of the videos, because I think you'll find them really useful, and it'll really explain a lot more about the human impact of heart failure and also the research that's being done to try and find a cure for it. So how about if we open up for the Q&A now and take some questions.
Great, hello, sorry, we've got our first question through via Phil from Facebook, and he asks, how close are we to the introduction of cell therapy for the treatment of heart failure?
So although I'm a biologist and don't work with that myself, some colleagues of mine are working with that, and actually, as far as I know, these experiments are already in clinical trials and they're tested, and we are all awaiting the results for these trials to see whether that will come soon into treatment for patients, or whether that's too risky, because there are plus and contras on either side. So we have to wait the outcome of the trials to see.
And there's competition between the different methods being used to find a cure for heart failure, I'm guessing?
Well, there are so many different routes, and I mean, this is why the BHF is funding such a broad range of research. There are very many different techniques that one could apply, and other strategies to transform cells that are already present in the heart and let them become heart cells to regenerate the heart. So there are many different routes, and we all try to work on the same goal, trying to find how we can mend a broken heart. So, yeah.
Lovely. Should we take another question?
Great, so the second one also comes from Facebook, from Anne. She asks, what is the most likely cutting-edge solution to be readily available out there for patients with heart failure? Will it be stem cells, free zebrafish, ghost hearts, or what?
That is a really good question, which we all would love to hear the answer for. So if we would know that, we would go straight for that. But unfortunately, we don't know that. But we hope with all the research that we're doing to find the best solution really fast, and that's why so many people are working at the same time on that to find exactly that answer. So yeah, it's a good question, but we don't really know.
And do you have any idea of how long it will be before you have an answer? That's a question we get asked a lot.
Yeah, I get that question a lot too, and I would love to be able to tell that this research is really time consuming, and it's not simple because the heart is such a complex organ and it's beating the whole time, and it's very difficult to work actually physically with it. But we're all working very hard to find a cure as soon as possible. So. Yeah. But research doesn't happen overnight, and this is why it's such a big effort, and that's why we need so much funding, because so many people are actually involved in this kind of research all over the world. It's not just here.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time.
Yeah.
Kate, have we got another question at all?
Yes, absolutely. This one's come through from James. He asks, are there any other animals that can regenerate their hearts or any other body parts?
Oh, yes. There are many animals that are showing great regenerative capacities, and for instance salamanders or newts, lower vertebrates, they have a large capacity to regenerate. So if you look for instance in the newt, they can not only regenerate their heart but also entire limbs. So studying all these different vertebrates and lower complex-wise lower organism allows us to understand how all these different processes are happening, and they give great insight into what might be possible if we understand it better, to be finding new cures and treatments. So there's a large amount of research that's done on other animals as well.
And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned, I was asking you about mammals, whether there were any mammals that could regenerate their heart.
Oh, yes. So I don't know whether you've heard about it, but there are studies now where they've shown that young mice, especially after birth, in the first week of their life, they are able to regenerate their heart perfectly well. And that's a great finding, because it basically means that somehow at some point during their development, the young mouse loses the capacity to regenerate the heart, and after 7 days of life, they actually are not capable of regeneration anymore. And Professor Riley is working on the mouse as well to try to understand all these different processes involved in the young mouse and the older mouse. So we hope by all these comparative studies that we will find eventually what makes these heart cells not be able to regenerate anymore, and then try to tackle that in the human eventually.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I feel like we're whizzing through the questions here, which is great. Have we got any more at all?
Yes, absolutely. We have one through from Mary. She asks, zebrafish look nothing like us. How can we learn anything from them about heart disease in humans?
Well, genetic-wise, we have a large amount of genes in common with zebrafish. And not just, zebrafish, but chicken and mouse and humans, we all share a lot of the same genes. And if we want to understand how genes work, we need to look in a model organism. We can't do that in humans. And the similarities between the different species are large enough to be able to make these comparisons. So a lot of other research studies have been done, and they've been all demonstrating that it is highly comparable. And to understand how one species does that helps a great deal to be able to understand how another species isn't able to do that, and what one could then experimentally tackle to find out if you stimulate these genes or inhibit certain genes, whether you could actually interact and make that species act differently. So understanding how things work in one species gives a great deal of insight. So it is not necessary that it looks like us. Just because the genes are so similar, it will teach us a lot.
So how long do zebrafish live for then, if they can regenerate their hearts?
2 to 3 years, and they regenerate their heart till the end of their life.
And do we know how often they regenerate it, or is it just if it sustains an injury? Or
so if you injure a zebrafish heart, it regenerates. So within 60 days, for instance, you see it perfectly regenerated. And it doesn't look like there's any restriction to that. So they have a large capacity, and people in the States have shown that even if you delete up to 60% of the heart muscle, if that gets injured, 60% of the heart muscle, it still regenerates fine. And that's brilliant, and we really want to understand how they're doing that.
So hopefully that bodes well for the future if it can repair that much heart muscle damage.
Exactly. So there's a large potential for finding, serious mechanisms that are involved in that. Yeah.
Brilliant. And the next question, please.
This comes from Robert Allen Jones via Facebook. He says, it was great to hear the news lately regarding a small trial of 5 stroke patients and stem cell injections leading to improvements. Are we at a similar stage in terms of heart disease?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. So as I am a biologist working on zebrafish heart regeneration, I feel a bit, I shouldn't, go too much into the work of my medical colleagues with that. So I do hope that a lot of different routes that are taken in this kind of collaborative research project all over the UK and in different labs will eventually lead to different approaches of regeneration. But I'm not sure whether that exactly answered your question. So there are a lot of trials and a lot of research studies out at the moment which are trying to get at different routes of treating heart disease and heart failure. But we have to see what the outcomes of these studies are, because it is very easy to just show something in a petri dish, but then to actually be able to transfer that into human research and into the clinic is very difficult. And to come from a great idea into clinical trials with all the legislation, it still needs about 10 years. So that's a very long process, and we hope that many researchers are able to work on that.
Right. Can we take the next question, please?
Great. So this one's for me, actually, because I'd like to know. What made you decide to become a scientist?
It's a good question. As far as I remember, I was always very fascinated by nature in general, even as a kid. And for me, there wasn't a different question. I always wanted to study biology as soon as I was able to think about that. And I did that straight after leaving school. And I went to study biology and physiology in Berlin. And then, went straight for exciting projects afterwards. And then came to London to study that further there and did my degree there. And then I came here. So for me, that was a straight route, actually. And I was always fascinated by muscle and by the heart. So from an early age on, I worked on that as soon as I started in biology.
I'm sure there's plenty of people watching this evening, if they've got any kind of heart problems, that will be glad there's researchers out there that are passionate about working in this area of research, that's for sure. Do we have another question?
Yes. Oh, yeah, I'm on. So the next question is actually kind of leads on to that, but I think bears kind of going on to you. The question is, do you think that one day we'll have hearts that naturally repair themselves after a heart attack?
Oh, I personally, and that's my personal opinion, I don't think that this is going to happen, because our genetic make, let's put it like that, is not capable of doing that now. And if we would have, a different set of genes, we might be able to do that naturally, but we can't alter our makeup. So what we will be perhaps able to do is treat this disease or this problem, but I don't think that we alter our gene set that much that we would be able to do that naturally. So I do think that is more regarded as a treatment and not as a potential for mutating ourselves into being able to do that. So no would be the straight answer.
Can I ask, obviously we know this is going to take a long time, and no one really knows how long it's going to take to find a cure for heart failure and a way to repair hearts, but yet you still seem very driven, even though this might take a long time. So when you come to the end of your career, what would you have hoped to achieve?
That's a good question. I'm very excited by science in general and finding things out. And really, curiosity drives me a lot. And a big driver for a lot of scientists is to leave something behind that is useful for humanity. And I hope that when I finish my career, I contributed to the human kind and to make some progress in science and research. And I really hope that my time will not be wasted and that I can contribute something important. I mean, the bigger the better, but you have to be humble. So
yeah. Well, it's the little advances that lead on to bigger advances anyway, isn't it? Yeah. Do we have another question?
Yeah, another one for me, actually. Having spoken about your career path, what would you say have been the high points of your career so far?
So I was actually grateful to have met so many great scientists throughout my life, and they influenced me all a bit. So yeah. Tell
us a bit about Professor Riley's team. How many of you are here? Because he came here obviously with our funding, but tell us about his team. How many of you work in it?
Yeah, so Professor Riley just recently moved from London to Oxford, and at the moment there's a large amount of change happening within the lab there.
Right.
So a couple of students and postdocs are still in London,
Right.
and a couple of postdocs and students actually came to Oxford. So at the moment we are split half and half,
Right.
and we are about 6 people here in Oxford, and soon become more. And then we have 4 left in London. So.
Right.
We are a nice little group that it's good to work in.
Are you all biologists?
Yes.
Right.
So some of the students are also medical people who
Right,
come for some courses and training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Have we got another question, Kate, please?
Yes, we've had one hot off the press from Twitter from Dr. Nick Young. He says, just wondering how far we are from clinical trials from any of the research being done with zebrafish.
Well, I would say that we are still far away from that, because at the moment we are at the very, very basic of how muscle cells work. So our work is not directly going into clinical trials. Our work will contribute towards knowledge that people would then, put into clinical trials. So we are working collaborative with researchers all over Europe and also the world to try to tackle how heart cells within the zebrafish heart are able to regenerate in which genetic network are involved in that. And this then can be used for other researchers who do the same work in mice and in humans to validate and look at that. But you cannot, put the outcome of our results directly into clinical trials. It would be a step too far. There are many hurdles to take, and our research is really basic, trying to find out the genetic regulations and the basics of these processes, and then that will take it further into the next level of scientific research with our colleagues.
It's natural that clinicians want to know how long it will be before we get to clinical trials, because I always wonder that myself. Do you feel frustrated when you get asked that question all the time, or do you find it's a motivation?
I find it actually great, because it gives me an opportunity to explain the work we do more, because it always shows me that there's a lot of knowledge that is missing in the general public.
Yeah.
We need to come out as researchers more and explain that more to people, because I get asked that from my family all the time.
Right.
What's going to happen with that, and you want to just explain how, on which levels research works.
Yeah.
You cannot just go and translate that from today to tomorrow into clinical trials, but it all helps. So if we find something really relevant, immediately the other scientists will pick up on that, and we will then go further with that.
Yeah, lovely. I'd just like to apologise. Apparently we did have some technical difficulties a few minutes ago. We weren't quite sure what was going on actually, but we know that we're back with you now, so we do apologise for that. And Kate, do we have any more questions at all?
Yes, we do. We've had one just come through from Jo. She's asked, how does the BHF's funding from the Mending Broken Hearts Appeal make a difference to your work?
Well, it does make a lot of difference, because, for instance, we have to buy a lot of equipment and machineries. Like, for instance, behind us, you see, here, an in situ machine. These machines enable us to work much more efficiently, and we can do many experiments at the same time while these are running. And the running cost of the lab is contributed by that. My salary is from that. We buy antibodies from these funding research monies, and we also buy a lot of equipment, and without that it wouldn't be possible. So if that project wouldn't have been funded, I wouldn't have been here, and this research wouldn't have been started in the UK. It's as simple as that. So somehow this needs to be funded by the general public, and this is the only way to do it, and we are so grateful for the support we are getting. It's amazing, and we get a lot of positive feedback from people, even plain ordinary people, my landlady, or just people are really excited about this.
Yeah,
I find it great.
But it also shows that the fact that it's going to take a while, that we need to continue to raise the money all the time, and people need to get onto our website, which is bhf.org.uk, find the cure. And if people feel motivated by hearing you talk about your work, that they'll donate money as well, because this is something we need to keep raising money for.
Yes, and as I said before, this is a big collaborative effort, and there's so many people involved in this research. It's just, it's not just me. Our lab is also a big group here in the JR hospital. My colleagues, many people up and down the hill here in Oxford, they're working on this, and we all are dependent on this support from the BHF. And without that, the great research that is done here in Oxford wouldn't be possible. So we receive a lot of support from the BHF, and without that, we wouldn't be able to do any of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of support from the general public as well, because I previously worked as a BHF-funded heart failure nurse, and there are lots of patients out there and their families asking about a cure. They're aware that at the moment that if they are diagnosed with heart failure, that it is a case of we're just treating their symptoms and hoping that they lead as full a life as possible, but they're all aspiring to a cure too. So even if you don't get to meet them all, there's plenty of people out there that are wishing you well and spurring you on. Okay, I'm not sure if we've got any more questions.
Yes, we have actually. We've had a few more just come through, which is great. So first of all, we have a question through from Jenny. She asks, how does Jana think we can get more women involved in science and research?
I personally think there are a lot of women in science and research at the very basic level and throughout the PhD. The problem is that as soon as women get over 30 and they are looking for a higher position, it gets suddenly quite a different balance between male and female. So I think supporting more childcare and making more family-friendly work situations would encourage a lot of women to stay in science. And at the moment, the field is very competitive, and research funding has gone down with financial crisis as well. And there are so few job opportunities at the higher level after you've done a couple of postdocs. So we study, we do a degree, and then we go on and we become mature scientists. And those job positions are actually quite rare. So to create secure jobs for a longer time period than just 1 or 2 years would help, to have a family and a life much better. And for a lot of women, it is unfortunately the situation that they need to decide either between science or between, their private life, and that's quite sad actually. And I would strongly recommend that there's a lot more done for enabling scientists to have nurseries at their workplace and to have more flexible work hours and also to work from home. But unfortunately, this is a lot of lab work that we do, which you need to do in a lab, so you can't do that from home. But it would be helpful if a lot more from the politics would be done to help women in that stage of their career to go in the next ladder into the professorship.
And it's a shame to lose those people to a decision like that based on the lack of childcare and the practicalities that I certainly, until you mentioned it, hadn't really considered when it comes to getting research done, right? That's really
it is also a big problem because people are quite hesitant to hire young women when they haven't had a child yet, because they always think she might have a child in 3 years. So I'm really grateful that there's so much support here, and we have a lot of kids in the lab, and we are quite fortunate in that situation. So there are good examples around me, and I'm really hopeful that this is a good environment to work here.
Great. Kate, you said you had some more questions. I think, have we got time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the latest one that's come in is, Jana, have you ever had a eureka moment?
Yeah, often actually. Sometimes you think you understood something, and then you go and talk about it, and you realize you haven't had the right thought, and then you go back and think about it for a while, and you realize, oh God, and all of a sudden it comes into your head, sometimes even at night, and you suddenly have the idea that flashes. So it happens occasionally when you're stuck, that all of a sudden out of nowhere it comes back.
Anything to do with the zebrafish research?
Sometimes with experiments where I'm thinking of what to do. So it's in general that all of what we do is not known, so we often sit there and just scratch our heads and think about what to do next and how to tackle a problem, and then you're stuck. And sometimes all of a sudden things fall into place, especially when you read a lot. Suddenly it all starts to make sense and it becomes clear. That's a nice moment when you have that in lab. It's great in science. You get that a lot.
Sounds great. I'm not sure if we're running out of time or not. Oh, one more. We can take one more question.
Great. So the final question is, what would a typical day in the life of your work be like?
We have a very varied work day, basically. It depends on what we do, but this is the exciting thing about science. It's very varied, and we can do a lot of different things, and we are multitasking all the time. So if I would come in the morning collect some zebrafish eggs. I would come in at 8 and collect the fish eggs, and then go and clean them, and then check my emails and answer everything and write a bit, and then go and start or proceed with some experiments that I did on the day before. And it involves a lot of bench work here in the lab and pipetting, and then I would also probably go to the microscope and scan. So we prepare sections and look at in situs and antibody stainings, where we then basically go at the different tools that we have available to look at the different tissues and examples that we have, and then you would go and analyze data or make figures.
Are some days longer than others if you're at a critical stage of your research?
It depends. So in development, as you might be aware, things never stop growing. So sometimes you need to pull an all-nighter and actually stay there, or do something overnight, or stay really late. It is very flexible, but in generally I try to be here 10 to 12 hours each day, and sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but that's a great thing about science. You can be flexible. You need to be doing what you need to do, and that needs, it's your own planning and your own time. So we are quite flexible with that.
Okay, lovely. So lovely. Thank you very much for all your questions, and I'm sorry if you sent in a question and we didn't get to it. I'd like to say thank you very much, Jana. It's been absolutely fascinating.
You're very welcome, and I would take that opportunity now to thank you all guys for listening, and also to thank all these supporters of the BHF, because for us it means the world, and without your support we wouldn't be able to do this kind of research here. And yeah, a big thank you to everybody who supports the BHF and me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And please, especially if you're inspired by what you've heard Jana say, do get in touch with us via our website, bhf.org.uk/find the cure, and do please donate to our Mending Broken Hearts appeal. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and goodbye.